Hello there, and welcome to The Value of Everything. So, Jamie Dimon has recently spoken at the Fortune Global Forum. He is the CEO of JP Morgan. He was talking about Bitcoin, and he was fairly pessimistic on that. However, under the hood, the blockchain technology he was fairly optimistic about. During that presentation, the audience was asked to speak. However, nobody put their hands up. Jamie is a very good orator. And I think I would like to take that opportunity to raise my hand and throw in some rebuttals to those comments. So we will explore those in just one sec, but I will just claim one thing first. Jamie did put out personal opinion, so opinion is conjecture, so it's not quite thoroughly thought out. So I have to be reasonable and accept that these are potentially passing comments. I will read into every statement that he has made and applied critical thinking, so I could be fairly unfair and take things out of context. That be said, he is a public figure, and we can sort of accept assertions have been given a certain level of consideration. Okay, so the very I've sort of broken down a few bits of what he said. One of them is there will be no real non-controlled currency in the long run. So the first argument, and it's a fairly easy argument to make on this level, is I just have to prove that Bitcoin will exist in the future. And there's a very simple way of proving that. All we require is energy and one computer running the blockchain, and therefore it will exist in the future. And there will be reasons as to why people would like it anyway. Firstly, there'll be a very, very simple thing anyway in itself. People like things for old relic reasons. So there's only ever been 21 million Bitcoins in existence forever. So people might just like to keep them just for some kind of old token gesture, even if it has been wiped out of the system anyway. So Bitcoins will exist in some degree, in some manner. The exchange system compared to the American dollar might fluctuate back and up and down, but there will be some kind of worth to a Bitcoin. It might be just 1 cent. It might be $1 million. Who knows quite what's going to happen, but there will be some kind of currency operation in the future for Bitcoin. Okay, so the next thing just to think about in terms of there will be no currency in the long term is just you've got to think of how people perceive the currency itself. So as long as people can perceive that government currency as a mechanism of property trade protection, uses the state's power, so like the police, the law, and the military, to deem that merchants accept it for goods. Also, you have the strength of the currency is also held due to forced taxes are to be paid to the tax agencies as sovereign legal tender. It is sort of a valid mechanism of property protection, property trade. So with that theory, I know it was a bit of a word jungle there, then surely people can accept property trade protection by a decentralized, encrypted accounting ledger. I know it's still a little bit complicated of what I'm saying there, but just to break it down a little bit even simpler than that, property is protected by the impossible number combinations, not force. So that is the simplest way I could just try and break it down to you in that sense. And then if people can accept that, then there's just a couple of other really good notches after that. So there's the validity of encryption or cryptography in the market. So whenever you use a web browser to go on your internet banking, you use cryptography on that. So it's used throughout the financial industry, just hasn't been expanded to the wider level in terms of property rights and people doing transactions directly with each other rather than using an intermediary. There's the moral argument, as it's voluntary and not forced upon people. People can just go out there and download the blockchain and transact with each other, rather than if you're born in a country, you really have to use the currency of that country to pay your taxes and get on by, unless you live in the woods, but it'll be a kind of a very strange existence. And then there's the security. So When we say the security, that's the ability of no tampering, no fiddling around with your value. So one very good thing is that where you have centralized power, with power you've got corruption. So i.e. credit expansion, liable fixing, deficit spending, quantitative easing, too big to fail, rent seeking, profits for shareholders, losses for taxpayers. So I think that's some fairly good pointers there in terms of how a currency can be perceived in the long run. Okay, then the other point is as well was from Jamie was that there will be no government to put up with this in the long run as well. We'll keep on mentioning the long run because in the short term, obviously, it is existing right now. Okay, so government putting up with something. So let me just make a little bit of a case of government, of what it really should be, not maybe quite what it is right now, but the government is the will of the people and not the government is the ruler of people. I know that once people vote the government into power, then they are pretty much ruler unto themselves, but in essence, that is what the government is. It is the will of the people. The next thing is, it is the choice of the people. So if we make a bold statement like the government is not going to put up with this for much longer, it has to be about the people. The people are not going to put up with this any longer. Okay, so there is a few little psychological things which are going in here as well. So people in general, depending on the level of indoctrination of the states, the patriotism, the education, all those kind of things, will love freedom. So in general, freedom should be the sort of core ethic of ourselves and what we should prevail to be. So that really is one of those important questions to people. What is more important, the freedom of ourselves, of humanity, or the money printing, the rehypothecation, the chummy central banking lending, the funding political puppet systems? Is that going to be more important for people? And I would definitely suggest that it shouldn't be. Okay. Next point. So there will be no currency that gets around government controls. So we have to ask this question. Government controls. Why are they there? What are they? So one of the very important things in terms of the rule of law is that if a bad man steals your money and puts it in his account, then the law system, the state, can reclaim the property back to you. So protecting your property rights. They are rescuing you from this bad person. And that is quite good and fair. It's a very good argument, and that is why people shouldn't be transferring money without sort of any recourse and things like that if they have been doing something malevolent. Now, the next point would be is in terms of the rule of law. If there is no complainant in this terms, if nobody says, hold on a minute here, this guy has stolen money from me, then really we are doing over due diligence to check on the counterbalances of whether somebody's doing wrong or not and stealing money. So we're doing a little bit too much work here, and we are applying guilty until proven innocent sort of scenario as well, and rather than innocent until proven guilty, in terms of our checks on controls of whether somebody is doing something dodgy and hiding it in their account. Okay, so probably still haven't quite convinced you there on those points, but I will just move on to another little theory. So if we move everybody onto the blockchain technology, so everybody has their own accounting ledger in which they can trade with each other. So and when I say trade with each other, I mean just go down to the shops to get some milk or anything like that. With this transaction, this ability to trade with each other, we can buy insurance in this day-to-day world so that if anything happens, any bad things happen, somebody steals money for us, there is an insurance system to stop when shit happens, basically. So insurance comes to the rescue. And say in this world of, if you did, everybody was working on an accounting ledger like the blockchain, and that was their sovereign rights and the thing that they were protecting in terms of their lives and livelihood, and it is covered by cryptography, so nobody can steal their identity in those terms, then we have a situation that, yeah, you're pretty fully protected. And in terms of if you've traded with somebody who is uninsured, it goes back to the old statement, buyers beware. Okay, and then you've got to think in terms of government controls. There are government controls which sometimes in some places are used for malevolent reasons. So you can have diplomatic warfare in terms of getting oil fields and selling these oil fields for no-bid contracts for your chummy corporate mates. You can do a war on terror, which is fantastic for the military-industrial complex, and the war on drugs. So the police, prison, industrial complex. And we all know in terms of government controls, where we have the freer money, it really channels our money into the most productive and the best allocation of resources. Therefore, inventions and ideas and the raising of living standards goes into the things that produce more with less energy. So it's really important stuff in terms of financial freedom, and where there's more government controls and bureaucracy, then there is a definite siphoning of power and economic freedom. So just to finally round that off, in terms of how technologies has changed over time, we have had in the past cart makers for horses really having the most advanced suspension, advanced seating and interiors getting wiped out by the car manufacturers. You had Kodak, who knew everything about digital photography but just sat back, enjoyed the cash cow, and never transpired into being a really advanced company today. They just went to the wayside and went bankrupt. And you think of the slave owners who didn't really think about the ability of the combine harvester in the future. The technology didn't exist, and they thought that the economy was going to go into meltdown if you never used the slaves. But it's amazing how, where you use moral principles and technology, how things can flourish, and you do have great things like tractors and combine harvesters and amazing things like fertilizers, which really change the way in which humanity works. So thank you very much for your time. If you've got any thoughts, comments, suggestions, rebuttals to me, rebuttals to Jamie, please put it below, and we